Mr. What shall I call you?
You may call me President Washington, sir.
And where do you come from, President?
Virginia, sir.
Oh, yes, yes, where the father of our country was born.
I am the father of your country, sir.
And how did you get into this century, President?
Providence brought me here, Your Honor. There, I think I answered that question without lying.
George Washington was a black man.
The following program contains violence, disturbing imagery, nudity, and, oh my god, why are you even watching this?
You ever just looked at a $1 bill? Just saying, like, it's crazy, like, this is what people kill each other over. This. We all fighting over this. Everything is coming down to this.
Okay, so this, when you pull up Adam Weishaupt, this is the drawing of him, but also this comes up. If you see, that's George Washington to the right side of the screen right there.
Right here, right there.
And that's Albert Pike without the beard.
Yeah, that's heavy right there. You telling me about that? That's heavy. Albert Pike without the beard.
Right. But all of these is the same motherfucker. Now, Adam Weishaupt is supposed to have been French.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And he was supposed to have written the founding documents of the Illuminati.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? But they paint him as a pale guy, but the guy behind the scenes, we not seeing him.
Mm-hmm.
So you would never figure out that Adam Weishaupt is the fake George Washington imposter who changed his name to Albert Pike when he got to America.
Mm.
You remember they was hunting Adam Weishaupt down in Europe after they discovered the Illuminati papers.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I read about that.
Yeah. So when they was hunting him down over there, where you think he went?
Now here's one of the 3 greatest Freemasons of all time, who actually helped construct the 33 degrees or rituals of modern Freemasonry, Albert Pike. A hideous man with a deeply complicated mind, and one who will soon help you to see who they really are. This is how important he is to Freemasonry. He's buried here, in the House of the Temple, a Washington Masonic Lodge, just around the corner from the White House. He was called the Grand Commander Sovereign Pontiff of Universal Freemasonry, a giant of this secret society, the only Confederate general who has his own statue. And who were the Confederates? The dudes that fought for slavery, not against it, defeated by Abraham Lincoln, who was surrounded by these Freemasons.
Abraham Lincoln was a black man.
And who was assassinated by this one, John Wilkes Booth, doing the same sign of the Master of the Second Veil. A Freemason assassinated Abraham Lincoln. Undisputable when you have the eyes to see. Now, Albert Pike writes in his colossal work, which some refer to as the Bible of Freemasonry, called Morals and Dogma, and on page 113 he says, "What can there be in common between the vile multitudes and the sublime wisdom?" That's what Freemasons possess, sublime wisdom. That's what their secret is. It's sublime. Here's Freemason Kanye West. Here he's giving the Masonic grip to his brother Mason Jay-Z. Look at the lapel he's wearing in this picture. It's the same double-headed eagle as on the front cover of the so-called Bible of Freemasonry, Morals and Dogma, written by the Grand Commander Sovereign Pontiff of the religion that Kanye and Jay-Z have been sworn into, and thus granted access to international success. His Christian conversion isn't what it seems, and you'll soon see what job he has to do.
I want all the kids that love my shoes and love my songs to say, why is Jay mad? What have you done to his people, to the darker Jews? to our brothers that had Jay speaking up, that had Nick Cannon speaking up, that had Ice Cube speaking up. What'd you say?
Would you say blacks is Jews?
Blacks are Jews also.
We gotta say we love Jewish people then.
Now look at what else Freemasonry thinks of the uninitiated, from the words of the Grand Commander himself. The truth must be kept secret, and the masses need a teaching proportioned to their imperfect reason. I hope you're listening.
They send us the Statue of Liberty, and it's a man dressed in drag holding a torch and a book.
Mona Lisa.
Mona Lisa.
This is right here. You read this one right here, right? The Adam
It said,
Weishaupt.
all of the illumination which human reason can give, none is comparable to the discovery of what we are, our nature, our obligations, what happiness we are capable of, and what are the means of attaining it. This is him talking about the temperament of the people whose bloodline this is.
We go to this book, History of the George Washington Bicentennial Celebration, Volume 1. This is where they document all the surroundings, all the history of George Washington, legend of George Washington, persona of George Washington. This is the book that documents all the historical facts about George Washington. So we go to page 225 of this book. The man himself, which is George Washington. Great similarities exist also in the word and the picture penned by those who met George Washington. So we want to establish that first. Full height, 6 feet 2 inches, ruddy complexion. What is ruddy complexion? We'll get into that, but we'll stick a pin there. Ruddy complexion. These are people who drew him, wrote about him. They're putting it about the man himself. Ruddy, of a red color, of a bright yellow color. That is ruddy, the meaning of ruddy. Examples of ruddy. Figure out what ruddy looks like. Ruddy red on the left, ruddy yellow, ruddy gold on the right. So he's florid and he's ruddy. He will be on the left-hand side of your screen. That's his complexion. Ruddy, a ruddy complexion, ruddy red. That's George Washington complexion, ruddy. But we won't stop there.
It's another Adam Weishaupt.
Adam Weishaupt. The most wonderful thing of all is that the distinguished Lutheran and Calvinist theologians who belong to our order really believe that they see in it, Illuminati, the true and genuine sense of Christian religion. O mortal man, is there anything you cannot be made to believe? Now he's telling you right here that they didn't convince these mortals to believe, and they telling them that, is there anything that you can't be convinced to believe? Like, if you believe this bullshit we telling you, you believe anything.
I am not an imposter, sir.
Your Honor, I don't think it makes any difference whether he's George Washington or not.
For there was a distinct French Huguenot strain in the lineage of George Washington. It came to him from his American ancestor, Nicolas Martel, a Huguenot refugee who came to Virginia in 1620. This infusion of Huguenot blood, Huguenot blood, into the Washington family, Huguenot blood, into the Washington family is a special interest both to historians and to psychologists. Each of these learned groups appears to agree that in this blending of the Cavalier and of the Huguenot, there is a definitely revealed a physical basis as well as a spiritual background for the extraordinary personage and character of Washington. All right, says here, History of the Conquest of Spain by the Arab Moors, with a sketch of the civilization which they achieved and imparted to Europe by Henry Copey in 2 volumes. This is from 1892. Page 445, they're talking about Columbus and his voyage and how his ship, his vessel, was fitted out in that little port of Palos, which had lately been a Moorish port. His sailors were many of them men with Moorish blood. in their veins, all right? These are so-called Negro conquistadors. It has been asserted that when the Moors, all right, when the Moors, who's the Moors? When the Moors were driven out of where? Spain and Portugal, right? Thousands took refuge in the south of France. Oh, they didn't just go to North Africa. No, they went to the south of France too, who afterwards, abhorring the Roman Catholic persecutions, became Huguenots. All right, Huguenots. And that of these, many emigrated at a later date to South Carolina and Virginia. As we just read, Nicholas Marteau, the ancestor of George Washington, right? The Huguenot. He was a Moor. Nicholas Marteau was a Moor. Yes, he was a Moor, so-called Huguenot. And he is the earliest American ancestor of George Washington. What does that tell you? He has Moorish blood, right? George Washington has Moorish blood.
You niggas is fighting over this white man. This dirty ass piece of paper of this white man that's not even George Washington.
Because they was using pale faces to block the institutions so we couldn't get the information. Even the Scottish Rite put it in the public domain in Morals and Dogma. And then they put out little snippets as quotes of prominent members of the Scottish Rite. George Washington was the shaved Albert Pike version, the same way as Mona Lisa was the shaved Leonardo da Vinci. You got to look at the pictures to get the switcheroo. They playing 3-card money with the shit.
This nigga got a wig on, bro. You niggas in 2022 got wigs on too. This the era we going to. All the niggas about to look like this.
It says here, George Washington, a biography by Douglas Southall Freeman, Volume 2. This is from 1948. Page 239 of this book, searched by the colonel, and the Martian was to no purpose. The man had disappeared. Laudon had then to attempt to identify Pierre Fidel on the basis of Van Horn's description, added to what the traitor had said casually in his letter of himself and of his military position. What tall, dark officer was there in America, 38 years of age, unmarried, who had eyed the camp and was going to participate in the expedition against Fort Duquesne? The only officer who was known to Lord Laudon's informants as in any way answering to this description was Colonel Washington, George Washington, who was what tall, dark officer? Tall and dark. Washington. He was single. He had an aide. He was to share in the next march to the Ohio. As it changed, Lord Loudon had close at hand Captain David Kennedy, who had seen Washington in New York in March 1756, when the colonel was returning from the visit to General Shirley in Boston. Loudon consequently asked Kennedy for a description of the Virginian. All right, they're talking about George Washington. Washington said the captain was a man about 6 feet, of a black complexion, again, a black complexion with black hair, which he then wore in a bag. Looks like a foreigner, a strong man. Kennedy remembered Washington's companions, Mercer and Stewart, and recalled that Washington's uniform was blue, faced with red and laced, right? Black complexions, so-called black complexions, right? So when they mean dark, they do mean black, so-called black, dark complexion, so-called Negro, right? Remember, he is a descendant of a Huguenot. He does have Moorish blood, so this makes sense, right?
George Washington, a biography by John R. Alden. We go to page 11 of that book. A British officer who met George Washington some years later reported that he had a dark complexion. So we're moving away from ruddy and florid, and now we're going into specifics. The officer met him, described him, dark complexion. No confusion there now. We're not stopping there. We keep going on. George Washington, a biography by Douglas Southall Freeman, volume 2. We go to 239 of that book. Van Horn description was fairly specific, The man who inquired about the letter was tall, with a red coat and a sword, and appeared to be a stranger. I wonder who is tall and appeared to be a stranger. The man who he described in the letter was tall, dark. I wonder who he's describing as tall and dark. George Washington, that is. What tall, dark officer was there in America, 38 years of age, unmarried, before he married Martha? What dark officer is there that he's talking about? None other than the only officer who was known to Lord London informants as in the way of answering this description was Colonel Washington, was George Washington. Tall, dark officer.
I'm going to start with Nicholas Marteau, the Huguenot, right? Nicholas Marteau, the Huguenot. It says passenger and immigration list, 1500s, 1900s. Nicholas Marteau, a primary immigrant. Arrival place, Virginia, 1620. Wow, 1620, right? What are they doing? It says here, the trail of the Huguenots in Europe. The Huguenots in Europe. So George Washington's Moorish ancestor, Huguenot ancestor. And we go down through his daughter Elizabeth Marteau, who married George Reed. And they together had Mildred Reed, who married Colonel Warner Jr. The Warners and the Reeds got together, and they had Mildred Warner together, who married Lawrence Washington, who was coming from John Washington and Anne Pope. John was the first one, remember? And then we got Lawrence and their family coming out of England, as it says here, the Sulgrave Manor. That's where their old Wessington house was. So then Lawrence Washington and Mildred Warner, they had Augustine Washington, who got with Mary Ball, and together they had President George Washington, and he married Martha Danbridge. Now we're going to get a description of Martha Danbridge. You guys are going to see what she was physically described as. I'm going to show you that she was also a dark complexion.
We'll go on to another book. Stick a pin on Ruddy. Martha Washington, First Lady of Liberty by Helen Bryan. Page 85 of that book. Martha, with her children and her fortune, married George. She was a rich lady as well. George had his own money. They came together. George, he was tall, just like what we have read. He's 6 feet 2 inches, with a ruddy complexion. Ruddy again, keep popping up. Let's figure out what ruddy is. We said it's red and of a yellow color. We'll go to another book. Mary and Martha, the Mother and the Wife of George Washington by Benson Lossing, LLD. Page 105 of that book. Washington was 6 feet. Everyone's coming back with the same height. His complexion was florid. What is florid? I mean, they keep giving us these complexion descriptions that we have no idea what they're talking about if we're looking on the surface. You're going to have to find the meaning of words once you come across them. Florid, bright in color, flushed with red, a lively red. So we know he's of a reddish color. As he's ruddy, ruddy's telling you is red also. So ruddy red of a bright red color. That's the description for George Washington. Again, Martha Washington, the First Lady of Liberty by Helen Bryan. We go back to that book. Again, just to confirm that it wasn't one time they mentioned her as brunette. Books after books after books gonna keep popping up with brunette. Page 155 of that book. Patsy, dark lady, because of her dark hair and her brunette complexion. Not done yet. And I have to exhaust this to make sure you know that George Washington's entire house was black. Martha again, dark lady as she was called in the consequence of her brunette complexion. Washington was deeply attached to her, to this little girl, his stepdaughter. He loved her, a black man, adopting a black child and loving that child as his own. No Caucasian family in his house, no Caucasian wife, no Caucasian stepson, no Caucasian stepdaughter. They were all black. Let's go to Patsy. George Washington, favorite stepchild in his marriage with Martha. We go back to the same book. George Washington, Bicentennial Celebration, page 209 of that book. Martha Custis, or Patsy as she was called, the death of the Dark Lady, as Patsy was called because of her deep brunette complexion. Deep brunette complexion. And we think brunette is a Caucasian person. No, it's a description for black women during that time. Brunette, a woman with a brown or dark complexion.
Just like the dark Welsh, right, in England, all investigation goes to show that this brunette outcrop is a reality. Brunette, brown, dark complexion, brunette outcrop is a reality. Continuing further down, it says, there is in addition evidence that points to Norwegians of a brunette appearance as another source whence brown complexion people may have come into England, all right? And it says here in the American Dictionary of the English Language, Webster's 1828 version, Noah Webster's Dictionary, says here brunette, a woman with a brown or dark complexion, all right? Brunette means dark complexion, dark complexion. Says here, History of the George Washington Bicentennial Celebration, Volume 1. This is from 1932. We're on page 225, Youth and Manhood of George Washington. It says here, the man himself, okay? Contemporaries of George Washington have commented that none of his portraits accurately resembled him. They don't resemble him. And a member of his immediate family is quoted as having said that picture of him painted by various artists all look very much alike, but are not really like the general himself. Do you see what they're telling you here? Who is that painting of? These body snatchers, whitewashed images. This is attributed to the fact that the expression of George Washington's face varied according to circumstances and the painter's side only and repose, right? So it's not him. His family members and all the people contemporary to his time are not describing him like that. A great similarity exists also in the word pictures penned by those who met George Washington at different periods of his life and under varying circumstances. One of the earliest of these depicts a handsome youth of 19, full height of 6 feet 2 inches, slender, blue eyes, an abundance of brown hair, and a clear, ruddy complexion. That does not mean white, so-called pale skin, or white man. That's the dodge to hijack. Ruddy, copper brown, reddish brown, copper, ruddy complexion. His manner, self-control, his speech well considered. Okay, he's ruddy. All those paintings of him are not him. They are not really like him. They don't resemble him. When you put ruddy animals on Google, you can do it yourself. This is what you're gonna get. This is what you're gonna get. You're gonna get this. Look at this cutie right here. This is what you're gonna get. This is a ruddy dog. As it says here, ruddy, right? A ruddy duck, right? Ruddy duck, ruddy. Look at that brown. Look at that rich brown, ruddy. So you guys can see if you put ruddy, you're gonna get all kinds of shades of brown, reddish brown. Ruddy, you never. They're not talking about somebody who got pale skin and red cheeks. No, this is ruddy, brownish, rich color. Ruddy, all right, ruddy. As you guys can see, this is the ruddy mongoose. As you guys can see, brownish, ruddy. So I think you guys get the point. Ruddy does not mean a white person, especially in colonial times, and the people writing in his times contemporaries are describing him with ruddy complexion, dark complexion, black complexion. We know he has Moorish blood. We know Anglo-Saxons, Welsh, English. These were originally dark-skinned people. We know he has Sephardic Jewish blood as well. And they're telling us in this scholarly source that the paintings do not depict him. That's not him. And we're in the book here, George Washington, a biography. And this is by John R. Alden. And I'm on page 11 of this book. So they're going to describe George Washington in this book here. Says he had property, he had prospects, and he was physically attractive, 6 feet tall. He was lanky, like many other Americans, like Jefferson and Lincoln. All right, just like Lincoln. Remember what Lincoln looked like? All right. He had rather long and lean arms and thighs, and he was flat-chested. He had strong but quite regular features, except that the upper part of his nose was unusually broad. All right, unusually broad nose. His face, like so many countenances of his time, exhibited the marks of smallpox. He had light blue eyes, all right, light blue eyes and brown hair, and was a vigorous male. A British officer who met Washington some years later reported that he had a dark complexion and a foreign look. A dark complexion and a foreign look. That's George Washington, okay?
Has no meaning. This has no meaning. None at all. No meaning at all. Just a piece of paper, bro. And this what niggas killing each other over. Dead white man.
May I ask you a question, sir?
You may, sir.
Will you continue to be George Washington?
No man should live beyond his time. Therefore, although I shall continue to be George Washington, for I can be no other, I will not be that untimely gentleman in your gracious presence.
What did he say?
Not trying to be insensitive, but you is not my relative. All irrelevant conversations take me out my element. I seen a nigga hating on me. Man, don't you be a